and realize too that things may very much change, when you're, I hate to use the word done, because we're not done, right? We're never done with our cancer treatments or thinking, oh, it's coming back. But you might decide this is not what I wanted to be doing with my life. Okay, make those changes too. Give it a little bit. Don't be doing all of it all at once. But yeah, just realize whatever you're feeling is okay to feel.
I'm Kandas Rodarte, and you are listening to Gratitude Geek, the podcast for female solopreneurs over 40, building genuine, lasting connections with clients, colleagues, and community. Today, I'm joined by entrepreneur and fellow thriver, Deb Krier. We are talking about being entrepreneurs while living with cancer. Welcome, Deb.
Well, thank you so much, Kandas. It is such an honor and a treat and a delight to be chatting with you. It's a serious subject, right? It's serious. We have to be serious. No, we have to have fun with this.
Exactly. If you take cancer too seriously, it is a serious thing. So tell us your story. How did you become this advocate for working or for building a business while living with cancer?
Well, so I started my business, Wise Women Communications, over 20 years ago. It's a full service agency. We have great fun. And then was thrown the curve it'd be about 10 years ago this month of, I go in for my mammogram and they said, you got to come back. Now, long ago, I worked for an oncologist and I worked for the American Cancer Society. So I knew, danger, danger. So what I was initially diagnosed with was stage 0. So we're not going to really worry about this cancer that, and it was not a concern. I mean, nobody was really overexcited about it. And so, we did a couple biopsies, we did some stuff and, didn't really get too excited. And then my doctor, after several months, said, you know what, let's go ahead and pull some lymph nodes. So I went in and 8 of 12 lymph nodes were positive for cancer. So I went from stage 0 to stage 3, just kaplunk, right? I didn't even have an oncologist. And so, that was the first indicator of, okay, my life has now been thrown topsy-turvy. So, got the oncologist. I had decided that I was going to do the very traditional approach, right? I was going to do chemotherapy, surgery, radiation. Everybody's got to do what works for them. And that was what I felt was going to work best for me. I had my first round of chemo, massive round of chemo, 8 different drugs. Now, I did not do Red Devil. You might have done Red Devil, but I didn't do Red Devil. And so I had 8 different drugs, was fine for a couple of days, and then about died. I ended up in septic shock. So yeah, 75% of people-ish don't survive septic shock. The only reason I am here is my doctor had already had somebody die from it. She knew what she was looking at. And so, obviously I survived. But I spent 7 weeks in the hospital and then, kind of went merrily along. In that is when they said, you know what, it's actually stage 4. And so, and at that point, you don't care, right? It's just like, whatever, I just want the treatment. And by saying stage 4, my oncologist said, this way we can do exactly what we want to do, but in this, I mean, I spent 7 weeks in the hospital, in and out of ICU, in and out of lots of surgeries. The septic shock did far more damage to my body than cancer ever will, but I kept working for the most part, and working was what got me through it. I had something to focus on. I had, people that were counting on me. So I really did, my best to keep working. There was one time where I was in the hospital for 7 days and my clients never knew, because hospitals and doctors' offices have really good Wi-Fi. And I just kept working. And I think that's, especially as entrepreneurs, as women, we just keep going. Did I have pity parties? Of course. But, we just keep going.
I think it's a choice whether or not you decide that you're going to work through and bulldoze through the bad times, or you're going to give yourself a break. I ended up stopping my podcast And it was a mistake. I mean, this podcast is the thing in my life
Mm-hmm.
that brings me the most joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it on a shelf after my metastatic diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
metastatic stage 4, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and, because of the cancer treatment that I was receiving, I would be in bed for 3 days. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't walk because of the
Right.
nerve,
Mm-hmm.
it affected my nerves.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I needed help going to the
Mm-hmm.
bathroom for 3 days. And then after that, everything was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And then thud, down you went again.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, 3 weeks later, exactly. And so I just put it on the shelf, but I really regret that I did. But I
Mm-hmm.
didn't stop truly working.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I worked through it. I just didn't do the
Right.
one thing that I loved the most, which
Mm-hmm.
was the
Mm-hmm.
podcast. So when the pandemic hit, I rebooted the podcast, and
Ah.
I've told this story on the show a
Mm-hmm.
100 times. But when I logged into Libsyn, which is the place where this podcast is hosted,
Mm-hmm.
everything was still there. Everything was working seamlessly, and
Mm-hmm.
it was receiving 30 to 40 download or 30 to 50 downloads a month, which
Cool.
in the world of podcasting
It's big.
is
Yes.
huge. Most
Mm-hmm.
podcasts
Mm-hmm.
don't get that many listeners.
In a year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe, I mean, maybe it was supposed to be put on the show for a little bit so that I'd appreciate it more. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. But again, just because you and I chose to work through
Mm-hmm.
cancer doesn't mean that that is the right
Right.
choice for
Right.
everybody.
Oh yeah.
It's a,
And yeah, and sometimes you can't. I mean, when people talk about chemo brain, folks, it's real.
yeah.
Chemo brain is real. I've had so many surgeries that's killed lots of brain cells. And then we won't talk about how far over 40 I am, but there is that also, right? We're going to be very cliche. You need to do you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And say yes to tools. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
you,
Mm-hmm.
I also did the traditional route, but I also tried reflexology and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
acupuncture and
Right.
chiropractic and
Mm-hmm.
massage
Mm-hmm.
and float tanks and
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
things to manage the
Right.
pain.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do those alongside of each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
I mean, I found I get really bad chemo brain, and I found a
Mm-hmm.
little 1.5 inch patch that actually helps me focus. It's called
Wow.
Focus.
Cool.
So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so
Right.
if you find the thing, don't be
Mm-hmm.
afraid to try
Mm-hmm.
things.
Right.
And if they don't work,
Mm-hmm.
try something else.
Yeah.
There is a
Oh yeah.
solution for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
essential oils,
Mm-hmm.
try it all.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that work, keep using.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. And all and luckily many doctors now understand that there are the alternative
Hmm.
things and they're going to work with you.
Yep.
So they might tell you, for example, I had a double mastectomy. So when I said, hey, I think I want to do some massage therapy, my doctor said, we need to get you to the right massage therapy
Yes.
people. So things like that,
Mhm.
and I'm a big advocate of keep your doctor in the loop,
Oh yeah.
especially if you are doing things from a nutrition and or medication aspect.
Yeah.
This is a world where marijuana is now used a lot, right? Just let your doctors know.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it is still your choice.
It's so interesting that you bring up marijuana. Marijuana gives me a hangover,
Mhm.
so I don't use it. I mean, I just don't, I'm like one of the 1 in 5 million people who gets
Oh.
a hangover from
Yeah.
marijuana.
Mhm.
But when I moved from Texas
Mhm.
to Michigan, and I
Mhm.
started up my treatment in Michigan after
Mhm.
being a patient in Texas,
Mhm.
two huge differences.
Oh, yes.
One was
Mhm.
when I was in Texas, I was packed in like a sardine into a room with 25 other people.
Ew.
And in Michigan, I had my
Mhm.
own little
Oh,
cubicle
your space. I love it.
with my own TV and two
Mhm.
chairs for people to come visit
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
In Texas, there was no place for anyone to come talk to
Right.
me and visit
Mhm.
me. And in Michigan, I had my own little space. It's
Mhm.
in my own
Mhm.
little suite. And in my very first appointment, when the nurse navigator took me around,
Mhm.
they sat me down and asked me if I wanted a medical marijuana card.
Ah, yeah.
Which is something that never would have
No.
happened.
Well, and I'm from Colorado,
Yeah.
the state that started it all. But now I'm in Georgia, and medical marijuana is still extremely restricted down here. And so I actually asked my doctor, and I'm one of those, I've never even tried it. Don't know what would happen. But I asked my doctor, I said, I'm just curious. What is your and it's a large practice. There are probably at least 50 oncologists. I mean, it is a really big practice. And she said what they decided as a practice was that for extreme nausea, they would do it. They said, because sometimes it really is the only thing that can help. And they said, but for everything else, they won't do it. And, and I kind of said, oh, and she said, it's because we don't know how it interacts with the drugs, and it is still not regulated. So what you get from Bob on the street corner, or I shouldn't say it that, Bob in the storefront, down there, could be very different from what you get from Sue, the next place over. And she said, we just can't take any risk with patients who are so medically fragile.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it's state by state. I mean, here in Michigan, it is so regulated.
Well, and that's going to be what happens is, the federal government will finally go, ooh, we can tax this.
Yeah.
And
do you know the sales tax on marijuana is 30% in Michigan.
Holy
So if you pay $100, you pay another $30 in tax.
Yikes. Well, and of course in Colorado, there's all these new bridges and roads, and
I have a beautiful road in front of my house. I thought that was paid for by the infrastructure bill in the last administration, not marijuana money, but there are, the millions and millions of dollars in tax income are coming into my community because my community chose to be marijuana friendly.
Right. And once they regulate it, now I don't know that I ever would take it, but and again, if somebody, if they really do think that's the best thing for them, then because it's in your head, right? If you think this is going to be horrible and awful, it's going to be horrible and awful. If you think this is going to make me better, it's going to make you better. And
there's some of that's true. Yeah.
I mean, that was the philosophy. I worked for an oncologist. Oh gosh, it's been about 35 years ago. And that is what he would tell patients. He said, if you think you're going to die, you're going to die. And
I do believe that.
Yeah. And he said, if you think this is going to be okay, it will be. He said, now it might only be okay for 2 weeks. He said, who knows? But your mental process and thoughts during that time frame, we're going to show how you're going to live. Were you going, this is horrible, this is awful, I'm going to die? I mean, you could live another 30 years. But if you're thinking, the whole time, well,
Yeah. My mom had leukemia, and in January, after she'd been through 6 months or so of treatment, she said, "Doctor, how long do I have to live?" And the doctor didn't want to tell her, and he finally told her a year. And guess what? She died a year later.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that's always one of those things that we ask, right? How long do we have? Well, and what's our percentage?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to know.
I never asked.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm going to live however long I'm going to live.
I did attend a dinner that was put on by a pharmaceutical company for patients that were taking Abraxane. Abraxane is the drug that made it almost impossible for me to walk for 3 days after I took, after I was given it. And the outcomes that they discussed in that dinner, I left that dinner bawling. I was crying because I did not want to hear those things.
Right.
And I know that some of the women in there wanted to, but I didn't, and I shouldn't have gone to the dinner.
Yeah. Well, and each person reacts differently. And that's the thing that people tend to forget, because, it's like, well, chemo's going to make your hair fall out. Chemo's going to make you nauseous. Not always.
Yeah.
And so you need to tell your doctor, hey, this is what's going on, because they can adjust things. They might, and all these things. So that's where you've got to communicate. I was talking with somebody the other day who she just started chemo, and she was saying, that the headache was unbelievable. And I said, what did your doctor say? And she said, well, I just assumed it was natural or normal. And I said, no.
Yeah.
You need to, I said, now he may tell you, sorry, you're going to get a headache. I mean, who knows? I said, but they need to know that, and yeah, it's all about advocating for ourselves. Yep. Doesn't matter what what it is, but we've got to advocate for ourselves.
I tell my oncologist everything because I don't know what is a side effect and what isn't. And if it's not something for her to deal with, she can refer me out.
Yep.
Oh yeah. It's a little frustrating for your primary care physician when you have an oncologist, because your oncologist is the person that you see all the time, and
Mhm.
then you
Oh,
see
and I tell people my
yeah,
oncologist is my boss.
yeah,
But my primary care doc, who I actually saw this week, I see her twice a year
yeah,
because she wants to keep tabs on me.
yeah,
And I like that.
yeah.
And
And everything
the
gets, all the tests and everything
oh
get
yeah.
run through her, so that if
Yep.
she
Hmm.
identifies something that
Hmm.
maybe my oncologist isn't going to,
Hmm.
because that's not
Right.
her zone of genius, your
Hmm.
primary care physician
Right.
has
Oh
general
yeah.
knowledge over
Hmm.
everything, and your specialists
Hmm.
are really good at what they do.
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having one person that
Hmm.
says, oh,
Hmm.
hmm, Deb is going to see this and then also
Hmm.
did this,
Hmm.
maybe I need to call Deb.
Yep.
And a really
Oh
good,
yeah.
my
Hmm.
primary care physician will call me even if
Hmm.
she isn't the one who referred
Hmm.
something.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw this. It popped up
Yeah.
on your chart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that means you've got a really, really good one. My
It does.
primary care doc, when I was initially diagnosed, did not even want to talk to me about it
Mm.
at all. And, and immediately referred me out.
Yeah.
And there were a couple reasons, but I ended up firing that person and getting this person who now I really like. But that's part of it too. If you don't like your doctor, and more importantly, if you don't trust your doctor, then get somebody new.
Yeah.
It's just yesterday somebody posted on Facebook, is it bad form to ask for to see somebody else in a practice? I said, I've done it twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that they're a bad doctor or
Yeah.
nurse practitioner or whatever it is. It just means you didn't click with them.
Yeah. Well, and it's also your health.
Yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
loved my first oncologist,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely adored him, but the office that he worked in was not good.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if you go to an office and you don't feel good
Mm-hmm.
when you're there, doesn't
Right.
matter how good the doctor
Right.
is.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to change oncology
Mm-hmm.
offices,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
I have my own surgeon, right? Who has their own surgeon? Um, because I've had, I mean, just surgical procedures over 30.
Yeah.
But this one gentleman, he has done 5, maybe even 6 fairly major surgeries on me. I would walk on fire for him. And we also joke. I mean, so you mentioned the breast cancer. I actually have 3 cancers. I had breast cancer, then I had basal cell carcinoma, and that sounds really scary. That's a little skin cancer, right? And that comes from being freckly redheaded kid that didn't know what sunscreen was. But then 2 years ago, I had thyroid cancer, and so I go into my surgeon, and there was no question he was going to be the one that was doing the surgery. I mean, it was, this is where I'm going. So I go in, and first he tells me, we'll put the incision, which is about a 4-inch incision. We'll put the incision in one of the wrinkles in your neck so it doesn't show. I'm like, thanks. And then I went back to him, for checkups. And I said, I'm still getting hoarse and having problems with my voice because your thyroid goes around your vocal cords, and they unfortunately damage my vocal cords. So this man who I would walk on fire for says, well, maybe you just talk too much. And I crack up. His staff is mortified. They're like, oh my God. And I looked at all of them and I said, y'all get that I've been here longer than any of you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but I literally, I mean, trust that man with my life. I trust my life to my oncologist. Some of my other doctors, I have lots of doctors. But yeah, if you don't trust your doctor, then get a new one.
Yeah.
Period.
And that rapport is so important.
Mhm.
I had to have my port, my first port was put in by someone who never even talked to me.
Mhm.
For most of these procedures, you're
Mhm.
awake because they need to
Right.
talk to you.
Mhm.
So this port was put in
Mhm.
by a radiation,
Mhm.
they're called
Mine was done by a pulmonary, but yeah. Mhm.
intervention radiologist. That's
Yes,
what they're
that's
called.
it. Yep.
So the
Mhm.
intervention radiologist who installed this port didn't talk to me at all during the procedure.
Ew.
And like a year later, it became
Mhm.
infected. I ended up in the
Ah,
hospital,
ah.
had to be
Mhm.
removed, yada, 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 yada.
Mhm.
So, Dr. Fang did 3 or 4 different procedures on me
Mhm.
because when you're going through cancer, you have all sorts of things that have to be done to
Oh,
you,
yes.
right? So
Hmm.
he's done 3 or 4 procedures on me. So when he's putting in the replacement port, like 6 months later, they
Hmm.
waited 6 months to put a new one in.
Hmm.
He's putting in the replacement port. We're chatting. He's Asian, I'm Asian. We're
Hmm.
talking about our Asian mothers. We're talking
Hmm.
about our kids, and we're just chatting away with each other. And when it's all said and done, and he's put the last stitch in, he goes, "That was by far the most difficult port insertion I've ever done."
Yikes. But
But
you never would have known, right?
not
Hmm.
once
Hmm.
during the conversation
Right.
did he ever
Yeah.
talk about how difficult it was.
Oh,
He
yeah.
waited until
Yeah.
it was all
Hmm.
over,
Hmm.
and he put in this little
Hmm.
tiny baby port. So I have a child's port
Oh. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
because it was so difficult. But you
Hmm.
know what? This thing is
Hmm.
over 10 is no, it's probably
Hmm.
10 years old. Maybe
Yeah.
not 9 or 10 years old.
I had to
Yeah.
have my port replaced. And for people who are wondering, a port is a thing in your shoulder. It's put under your skin. And they can draw blood from it and you can get IVs from it or
Hmm.
into it.
Hmm.
If you're doing a
It's
simple blood
it's
draw,
connected through a
yes, and
central line in your
yes,
system.
into your heart,
Yes.
and so
And
like
it's
my,
big. It's like
yeah,
it's
oh
mine
yeah,
starts up here and it's into your
yeah,
heart.
oh
Yeah.
yeah. And when you get x-rays, there's all this extra tube curled up in
Yeah.
your heart. It's the weirdest thing in the world. But it makes it much easier because for one thing, it's faster. Like my 30-minute infusion, if it had been an IV, would have been 3 hours because it's going straight into your heart and then pumping right out. Well, I had to have my first port replaced because my dog broke it.
Oh, did your dog jump on you?
He jumped on me
Oh,
and caught it and twisted it sideways.
oh no.
Oh, I turned colors and said bad words.
I'm sure that
And
hurt too.
oh, and so we used it for a couple more times. I mean, they were able to make it work. But I finally said something to the oncologist, and she poked. I mean, like one poke. I went from her office to the pulmonary surgeon.
Mm.
It was, and she was not happy. Not with me, but and he was like, "Your dog did what?" But I was fortunate enough to get my port out in December. And so, I go in and I thought they were going to knock me out. Any other time they completely knocked me out. But so I fasted, and I don't do well with not eating. I get very hangry. And so I go in, and this is, like I said, December, and I go in, and when they did the new port, it was installed differently. And so they knew it was going to be a little bit more complicated to take it out. And so they get me in this really awkward position. And they said, now you cannot move. Okay. And for me, not moving is almost like telling me not to talk. And then they covered my face so that I couldn't see but I was alert and talking to him the whole time. And so, the he comes in and he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. And I'm jibber jabbering along the whole time. And he's going, right. And so over the loudspeaker comes the Charlie Brown Christmas song, right? Da 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 da. And I'm like, everybody dance. And I mean, like, and my toes were going because then they told me not to move.
Uh-huh.
And of course I hear nothing. And so I say, excuse me, are you dancing? And so after we're all done and they undrape me and I'm actually looking face to face to this man, I said, I'm really sorry. I jibber jabber. I said it wasn't nerves or anything like that. I just jibber jabber. And he looks at me and he says, best patient I've had all week. And I was like, but yeah, you have to dance when you hear that, right?
That's true. You do. Da 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 da.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's Linus, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, it's and I've had nurses before when I go in, I can hear them, oh dear, she must be nervous. She's talking so much. And I've heard that more than once. And I'm like, oh no, I'm just like this. Now there have been times where I know they have knocked me out early to shut me up. And but part of it too is I want to make them laugh. They have really hard, really icky jobs.
Yeah.
And so can I make them laugh?
And most of the time their patients
right. Are very serious.
Aren't caring about their well-being. They only care about themselves, which is fair. I mean,
right. Oh yeah, especially
you've got cancer. It's very stressful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. But if I can make them laugh, they're going to go into the surgery with a little bit different mental thought.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, I jibber jabber with them. Like they do that now, Candace. what is your name and date of birth? Right. I hate, and so now I never do this with a new person because I don't want to freak them out. But, if it's somebody I know, I am Anastasia Beaverhousen. And they've decided in the infusion room, because I still go in every 21 days for treatment. In fact, I was in yesterday.
So why did you have your port removed if you're still doing Herceptin?
Because
I'm assuming it's Herceptin.
It's Herceptin. They can do it as an injection. It goes in my thigh.
Okay.
And so I feel like I've got a Charlie horse for a couple of days, but yeah, they do it as an injection.
I forgot that they had come up with an injection.
And so I do that, but they have decided that I am Princess Anastasia Beaverhousen. And so as I leave, we must do the princess way.
Yes,
right?
It's very, very important.
Yes. And they will call me Anastasia, and the other nurses who don't know are like, what? Who? We don't have anybody in here by that name.
No, that's so funny.
But yeah, it is incredibly serious. But how can we lighten the mood even temporarily?
While you're on the 21-day treatment, what do you tell people? Because I get this a lot. What do you tell people when they ask you, well, how long do you have to be in treatment for? Because I get this question all the time.
Yeah. So I am on long-term Herceptin because my body could not tolerate chemo. It tried to kill me, right? And so I did not finish my chemo. So I do Herceptin. Now I will hit the 10-year mark later this year, and I'm going to have the discussion. Hey, have we done this long enough? I am on it. And well,
do you have any evidence of disease?
No. And now I've had the 3 different cancers, but they've all been right then, and nothing has come since then. But so one of the things for people who don't do Herceptin, it can damage your heart. I mean, that is one of the things that is icky nasty. And so I go every 6 months because my heart's really healthy, and I have an echo.
Yeah.
My numbers have not changed since day one.
Yeah.
And so my heart is incredibly healthy. But, so that would immediately be a reason to stop Herceptin, would be if my heart started to be affected. But yeah, I mean, and there are people who ask me, well, why are you still doing this? Right? It's been 10 years. And my response to them is, it is what my doctor and I feel is the best course for me right now. And I take letrozole, which is the older person's equivalent of tamoxifen. And so, but I will go off of it before too long because the protocol is only 10 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and the amazing thing is those are the only 2 cancer drugs I take. But yeah, it just, and now it was funny when I decided to have my port pulled. My doctor said, okay, let's do a PET scan. Let's just make sure everything's good before we take this out. So I did the PET scan, and then I go in for my treatment, and they said, your insurance didn't approve it. I was like, and so and now when you're a long-term person like me, and I have really good insurance, we're very fortunate. So I have an advocate at my insurance office that I can call. And I said, what the heck? Why am I still having to get an infusion? I want to get this port pulled, blah, 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 blah. And this very sweet person says, we want you to have a PET scan before you have your port pulled to make sure that you're okay, which just shocked the heck out of me, right?
Yeah.
And I said, well, honey, I had that 2 days ago. And she went, oh, okay. And she flips through stuff and she says, okay, you're approved. Obviously not right then. They'd already pulled the drug. But she said, yeah, we will approve that you get the port pulled and you can go with the injections. And so, but yeah, it was, I will do it as long as my doctor says I should do it.
Yeah. Herceptin is so listener, if you aren't familiar with Herceptin, it is a 30 or 40-year-old drug that was developed, I think, in the late 80s by a man who was very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, he knew that this drug was going to work, but the drug company pulled the funding. And so Revlon gave him the money to finish the research.
I love it.
Which is why I love Revlon. Because Revlon is responsible for you and me and millions of other women being alive today.
Right. But it's not traditional chemo.
No, it's a biologic. It's a monoclonal biologic. It targets the HER2 protein.
Right. So, which is responsible for cancer cells replicating.
Correct. So anyway, where was I going with this? Anyway, Herceptin is so old that it is now in the generic stages. And so
Yeah.
there are, half a
Yeah,
dozen or
there's
more.
biosimilars.
Yeah, there's half a dozen or more generic biosimilars to it. And so my version of Herceptin keeps getting changed because the insurance company gets to dictate which version the doctor
Yeah.
gives me.
Oh, yeah.
So I never know which version I'm getting because it's up to the insurance company, and which means that the doctor's office has to stock every generic brand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, I'm in a big practice, so they probably do anyway, but it was really funny when they switched me from Herceptin to Kanjinti, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Biosimilar drug.
Yeah.
I had to meet with the social worker. And I was like, why?
Yeah.
And they said, well, we're changing your, and I said, well, Gina's okay with me changing it. So why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
But I had to sign the form saying, yes, I approve. And,
Yeah.
and I mean, we laugh and we joke about this, but they're doing this for our own good to make sure we're educated and approving of all of this. But yeah, and they had the injection, they've had it for a while, but it was still considered experimental.
Yeah.
Until the last couple years. And because the first time we applied to do it, they said, nope, no way.
Well, does it work the same way like birth control injections work, where it slowly releases the drug over time? Okay.
So no. So what it does, and of course, because I'm special, I have to do it a little bit different. And so it goes into your thigh, into the big muscle in your thigh, and it's supposed to take 5 minutes. So it's a very slow push type of injection. Now, I had 2, and on the 3rd, I got a reaction. I had hives, I had ickiness. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to have to go back to the regular way, and I'm going to have to get a port and whiny, whimper. And so, what we came up with is that we ice the place on my thigh. So we freeze it good. And then they do 10 minutes. So they put it in much slower. And so far, knock on wood, that works. I get a little bit of a reaction, but not much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
there's ways to get around these things. Yeah. I do my Herceptin over 45 minutes instead of 30.
Mine was 90.
And I get a Pepcid injection before it so that I don't get heartburn. I mean, there's you just work around it. So, sometimes you take a Benadryl before you do it. I mean, there's ways to work around allergic reactions.
Well, and again, that's where you tell people, hey, here's what's going on. When I got the reaction, it was really funny because I showed it to them and they said, how long a drive do you have to get home? And I said 30 minutes. Now they know my husband. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. And so they said, call Tom, because I go by myself. I don't need anybody to go with me for this, and they said, call Tom, tell him you've had a reaction. And if you're not home in 45 minutes, he's to come looking for you. And so that's what I call and tell him. And his response was not printable, right? And then they told me, they said, now, if it's still bad when you get home, take Benadryl. They didn't want me to take Benadryl and drive, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I get out my box of Benadryl and it says expires in 2016. And I thought, guess I need to go to the store. Clearly, but yeah, I mean, it started itching, and I went back in and I went, excuse me, I got a problem.
That Benadryl is a miracle drug, though. My daughter,
Pepcid, right? Yeah.
My daughter just discovered that she is allergic to wheat, not gluten, wheat. She's allergic to wheat. Yeah. And giving a pizza when you're in your 20s is not easy,
right?
And a Benadryl lets her eat a pizza. Lets her eat pizza. Yeah. So I mean, Benadryl is good for a lot of different things.
Oh yeah. I used to take it to sleep. Right. But I have to be careful on Benadryl because you know how it says may cause excitability in small children. But when I've had to have shots of Benadryl, a day later, I'm still going zingity, 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 zingity.
Really? Oh man, it puts me out. I actually asked for to do Pepcid instead of Benadryl before my infusions because and Pepcid, I know it's an antacid, but it has that antihistamine effect as well.
It does, and it makes your body accept things differently or something like that. Yeah.
But anyways, I had to stop it because I would just fall asleep and then, be drowsy and not, you can't drive yourself if you're drowsy.
Yeah. Zippy, zingy, zingy.
So we have had,
oh my gosh, we just had the support group.
Yes. However, so we actually need to wrap up. If someone listening to this episode has
Mm-hmm.
been newly diagnosed with cancer and they also own a business, what is your advice for them?
Don't panic. Know that every feeling you have is normal and natural. Grief, anger. I was pissed. I literally told them I didn't have time for this. But it's okay. Feel all those feelings and accept it. Don't think, oh, I shouldn't be anxious, not me. And so, but then take the steps, figure out how you're going to go forward. Are you going to try to work the whole time? Are you going to put stuff on hold? All of those things. But it is a good time to kind of be thinking about your business. Who are your clients? If something happens to you, who can pay them? Who can notify them? You need to decide if you're going to even notify them. A lot of people choose not to ever tell, and that's fine. That's great. But yeah, be thinking about some of those things, and just really, and like we said, sometimes people need to put stuff on hold. Sometimes they need to power through. Plan on both, because you never know when something might happen. But it's a good time to sit down and really be thinking about that, and realize too that things may very much change. When you're, I hate to use the word done, because we're not done, right? We're never done with our cancer treatments or thinking, oh, it's coming back. But you might decide this is not what I wanted to be doing with my life. Okay, make those changes too. Give it a little bit. Don't be doing all of it all at once. But yeah, just realize whatever you're feeling is okay to feel.
That's a great advice. And I'm going to add to that. Cancer is your excuse to really look at the things that you do in your life,
right?
And
determine whether or not, you're around,
and the people that you're around, and decide. And you'll also, this is true. It is so true. When you're diagnosed with cancer, there will be people who step up and become your biggest advocate, your biggest friend. And then when you're done with treatment, those people may disappear.
Right.
Because that's what they love doing.
That was their role. Yep.
And they love that role.
Yeah. And there will be people who you thought were going to be your biggest advocates who cannot talk to you about it at all.
Exactly. But when you're better, they'll be back in your life.
Right. Yeah.
And
they still don't want to talk about it. But
and that's okay. Yeah. And then there'll be people who walk up to you in the grocery store and start talking to you when they see that you don't have any hair. Right. And it's up to you whether or not you're going to allow them into your space.
Right. Yeah.
And
people will say weird things. I had somebody who came up to me and at a networking event several months after and yanked my hair because she wanted to know if it was a wig.
How rude.
I said, what the? Yeah. And I mean, I was like, would you have pulled it off if it was? But those are the same people who walk up to a pregnant woman and just reach, right? Yeah. No. Boundaries, folks.
You
boundaries.
Ask permission. And if they say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some pregnant women don't mind if you touch their belly.
Right. In fact, some might take your hand. I'd be like, nah.
But you gotta ask. You gotta ask.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
I want to just remind folks, you are the person in charge, not your doctor, not anybody. Get their opinion. Avoid Dr. Google. Right?
Yes. Please do not do Dr. Google. Yes. Do not do Dr. Google.
Oh, it will scare you half to death. And just know it's exactly what Kandas said. People will handle it differently. Give them the grace to know, okay, that's just how it is with them. Don't be mad at them. Don't whatever. Just know that. But it's your journey. You get to map it out. But make sure people, I never expected that 3 times my husband would be told I'm not going to make it. So, that's the thing is, have you taken those other steps that you should take? We hate to think of advanced directives, wills, do those. You never know when you might need them.
Yeah. And I'll link in the show notes to an episode I did with Adam Zuckerman, who has a business that's all around advanced directives.
I love that.
End of life planning.
That. Yep.
And also,
and I listened to your death doula episode also. Very important. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. That and just knowing that you have these tools available is so
Yeah.
important.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
we don't think, well, death doula, I'm never going to need a death doula.
Right.
Everybody is going to need a death doula sometime in
Right.
their life.
Yeah. I mean, some of the stuff that she was talking about in their interview was like, who gets your Facebook?
Yeah.
Right? You
Yeah.
know, and
And
all
who do
those
you
things.
trust to clean out your secret drawer that nobody knows about?
Yes. Yes.
You know?
Mhm.
I mean, all those things are really important. I also want to mention that when you are diagnosed with breast cancer or with cancer in general, or any debilitating disease, there will be people who think they are doing you a favor by telling you about conspiracy theory
Anything.
treatments. And it's really important to your sanity that you don't get sucked into that.
Right.
Because coffee enemas don't cure cancer.
No. You know, I had somebody who was going to sell me a protein drink. Okay, you know, that was probably going to be good for me, but it was going to cure me.
Yeah.
And the fourth time she did her pitch, and I was very polite every time. Thank you for the information, right? And luckily, she could never see me rolling my eyes.
No.
But the fourth time she pitched it to me, I kind of was cranky, and I said, "I'm sorry, but if you had the cure for cancer, you wouldn't be selling it out of the trunk of your car."
Yeah.
You know, and avoid the people. Now you're going to get this no matter what. Well, Candace, my grandma had the exact same type of cancer. Yada yada. Oh, she died.
No.
Right.
And no,
Yeah.
nobody has the exact same type of cancer, because there's a gazillion types of cancer,
Yes.
and you are you.
And even
your
if it's
situation,
the same diagnosis, that's where it ends.
And we have different cultural backgrounds.
Yes.
We have different DNA. And let me tell you, your DNA is a lot more influential over the treatments that you have than you think it is.
Oh yeah.
You know, my DNA says no alcohol.
Right. And
It's
mine says,
Yeah.
mine is that I'm a redhead.
Yeah.
Which means I need more anesthesia. I'm going to come out of it faster, and I have a much higher pain tolerance.
And you sunburn.
Yes. And then I get spots. You know, I'm like, and then I have to go do the strip and spin.
You do have a gorgeous head of red hair, though.
Thank you. It all goes to my hairdresser. But yeah, I did the strip and spin this week, and my doctor, God bless him, he tells me, please stop calling it that. And I said, but it's what you do. You strip, you spin.
That's true. That's true. While the doctor's talking and someone's taking notes.
Yes.
It is. I know it is the dermatologist strip and spin, we'll call it that, is just as invasive as a pap smear, in my opinion.
I know, you know, and I always have to remind them all, okay, I have more incisions than you're ever going to see, you know, on most people. And I said, so don't freak out. And I didn't have reconstructive or anything like that. And so I just have this mass of incisions, because then I had a whole bunch of other incisions from septic shock. But and so I always, and of course, you know, he remembers, but it's always a different aid, right? So I always tell him, don't be startled when I take my clothes off, you know? But and then they shine the lights on you.
Yeah. So back to my advice, though, is that people will tell you all these crazy things. Some of them will make sense, some of them won't. I am definitely not a fan of this whole coffee enema thing.
I never got that one. Yay.
Oh yeah. Sorry, horse dewormer does not cure cancer. You know, just
no.
If your oncologist hasn't heard of this treatment, it's probably hooey.
Right.
However, things like aromatherapy, acupuncture, those things that help with that they may alleviate the side effects. Right. Not cure cancer, but alleviate the side effects. Like lavender oil helps with nausea. It does. Peppermint oil
and sleeping.
Helps.
And,
yes. There's so, but it might not help for you.
Right.
So be open-minded, but understand the difference between an alternative complementary therapy and a hooey.
Yeah. And I always know that for the most part, unless they're the snake oil salesman, they mean well. And so I politely thank them while rolling my eyes.
Yeah. And there, I mean, that, if I talked about the little yellow patch that helps me focus, some
Mhm.
people are going to roll their
Right.
eyes when I talk about that, but it works for me.
I love that. Yeah,
Mhm.
and it's not doing you any harm.
No.
That's the thing.
Hmm.
And there are certainly people who, and I got this. Why are you killing your body by having chemotherapy? And I said, because that's what I think is my best chance.
When I look at the statistics,
Mm-hmm.
11 years of chemotherapy. It's not
Mm-hmm.
really chemotherapy. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like Herceptin's a biologic.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
11 years. I did probably 9 years of hormone
Mm-hmm.
suppression, which I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to do anymore because
Mm-hmm.
I'm old enough,
See, and I
you
was
know.
older to
And
start with,
and and
so
11 years of
mm-hmm.
the biologic
Mm-hmm.
and two and a
Mm-hmm.
half years of chemo
Mm-hmm.
and all the things that I did. It's been 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
I watched my daughter graduate from high
Mm-hmm.
school. I
Yes.
watched my daughter graduate from college, and I watched
Mm-hmm.
my daughter graduate from grad school.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't think I would have had,
No. Mm-hmm. Okay, you just give me chills.
yeah, I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
think that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Right.
what the outcome would have
Yeah.
been, but
It worked.
it worked,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm
Right.
here, and
Yeah.
I'm doing fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And if the inconvenience of having to go to the cancer center every 3 weeks for the rest of
Mm-hmm.
my life, I have to do
Mm-hmm.
it for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Every 3 weeks for the rest of my life,
Mm-hmm.
because I have breast cancer in my lungs.
Ah.
Very
Mm-hmm.
tiny,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
Mm-hmm.
there. So
Right.
I will do it.
So you
And
just keep
yeah,
treating.
I just
Yep.
keep
Mm-hmm.
treating.
Yeah.
We just keep
Mm-hmm.
treating until it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work anymore, but it's going
Mm-hmm.
to continue to work because it's
Right.
been working for as long as it has.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
it's got a 35, 40-year
Mm-hmm.
track record,
And
right?
who knows what they will have if something changes.
Exactly. I mean, they didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
injection,
Mm-hmm. Right.
up until
Mm-hmm.
like 5 or 6 years ago. I actually completely forgot about the injections.
Ask about the
Well,
injection. So much easier.
I don't think I'm the
Oh,
right
a
candidate for the
candidate.
injections. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Plus, I'm not going to give up my port. My
I
port,
loved mine and I hated mine. It was a big decision, right? Mm-hmm.
but yeah, but I mean, it's your decision.
Mm-hmm.
You get to decide whether or not
Yes.
you're going to continue
Mm-hmm.
to do business, to
Mm-hmm.
have your business. If you're an entrepreneur and you get
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed, you
Mm-hmm.
get to decide
Yeah.
whether or not you continue to be an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur or not. But you just understand
Mm-hmm.
that you have options and that
Mm-hmm.
people will give you grace.
But if they don't give you grace, then thank them and move on,
Hmm.
right? And you might have to totally say, I'm not going to deal with you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those things. I had a couple people like that who just would not let some things go.
Yeah.
And there's only so long that this redhead is going to be patient.
Yeah. The fact that a redhead is patient at all says a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Genetics, man, genetics.
I know. And so, but to me, I also saw it and see it as a learning experience and a way for me to grow.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And there's opportunity. I've had opportunities because of
Mhm.
my cancer
Right.
diagnosis that probably wouldn't have had,
Mhm.
and they've all
Right.
been wonderful. And
Mhm.
people have come
Mhm.
into my life, and people have. I mean, it really.
Mhm.
There is a book out there. I've talked about this before, audience. So if you hear me harping on this book again, it's called "Cancer is Not a Gift, and It Did Not Make Me a Better Person." And I think that is the most cynical title
Mhm.
for a book
Yeah.
and cynical viewpoint that
Mhm.
I've ever heard.
Mhm.
And I mean, just why would you even put that out there?
Right.
You
And
know?
why would you read it? Ew.
Exactly.
Ew.
Exactly. All
Yeah.
right, Deb, I'm sorry. We have gone way over.
I know. Chitty chat, chitty chat. This was great fun.
This is
Hopefully,
your,
everybody listening got something good out of it.
yeah. So just the final message really
Mhm.
is do your cancer diagnosis isn't the end of your life. It's
Correct.
it's the beginning of something
Mhm.
new.
Mhm. Right.
Deb Krier, this is your moment of gratitude. For whom or what are you most grateful?
Today, I'm grateful for you and for this really fantastic conversation and the opportunity to be able to share our message with people.
Thanks for tuning in to Gratitude Geek, the podcast for female solopreneurs over 40, building genuine, lasting relationships with clients, colleagues, and community. Our theme music is by Rev Brock and Solily. To connect with Deb Krier, head over to the show notes at gratitudegeek.com. This is episode 281. I know. I've been your host, Kandas Rodarte. Stay groovy, my friends.
Stay groovy, my friends.